You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Helen Mackenzie, and today is Friday, March 17th, 2023.
6.
I was delighted to be asked to speak at the Busius conference last week in Athens. Among the themes being discussed by the delegates was the topic of supply chain risk. What risks are current, what's emerging, and how to manage them. Now, we're no strangers to discussing risk here at Art of Procurement, and I was interested to see what new tips I could find to share with you. I've chosen one from Professor Carsten Macholtz's keynote, Code Red for Resilience, How to Survive in a Multi-Crisis World. In his presentation, Carsten urged us to stretch our time horizons past the short term. He advised that while the cost of living crisis and geo-economic confrontation might be on our supply chain risk register now, adopting a longer-term perspective would bring things like climate change into the picture. So my tip for you today is how can you take the professor's advice and lengthen your risk time horizon to look further into the future?
5.
In this week's podcast, Philip Ideson was joined by vendors Emily Campbell and Nick Pinkman to discuss the topic of shadow spend. Now that's those categories where it's easy for distributed buyers to act independently, things like cloud software for instance. In the extract I've chosen for you today, Emily gives us her thoughts on how to create a partnership with IT to manage this spend.
So I've sort of hit on involving people from the start. And I think that's really the important thing here is removing the iron curtain, being transparent about our policies, our processes, and also our decision making. There's been a growth of workflow tools. It's something we're working on at vendor as well. That's one possible way of helping to give more transparency to the process. So that's where I'd start, making sure that people understanding the framework of what are the gates we have to pass through? How can you make a case early on? How can you help negotiate at the decision level? And basically, work with us, work with procurement to do this together. So that's, from the procurement end tools that we can use. Other things that I've seen companies start to explore is things like using our budget not so much as a like kingmaker, you can have a budget, you can't, but rather seeing the way that we budget our finances as an unlocking of innovation within the business, almost thinking like a venture capital group. What are we trying to do with this money, with this tool, with this infrastructure? How are we going to know if we were successful? And what is the scale that we need in order to get to that first milestone where we can say, was this the right investment? Should we be investing more? So that's another tactic that I see teams start to adopt. Again, looking at some of those more mature practices, but drawing from what's already happening inside of the business. We're used to the idea of thinking about planning ahead, OKRs, KPIs. How can we adopt that into our business infrastructure, our financial and IT management, and not, just leaving that for the product teams to think about that holistically.
Engaging with people and planning ahead sounds like a great approach when it comes to shadow spend.
4.
A couple of weeks ago, I was delighted to be able to attend ProcureCon Indirect West in San Diego. It was great to hear from delegates and I got my voice recorder out to capture a few thoughts. Here's what they had to say about what's on the agenda for procurement teams.
Some of my key takeaways from this 3 days have been really around some best practices on KPIs and how those are evolving and look different than maybe how we were looking at them several years ago, especially pre-pandemic. Also, ESG, so that's a big, sustainability and thinking about how we buy, focusing on more diverse and green initiatives. That's been some really insightful opportunities that we can take away and work on there.
I think the biggest takeaway was how we make procurement a customer-centric organization and really looking at not just putting compliance and risk, though those are important fundamentals, it's really looking at our customers and how do we collaborate with them. That's huge.
So, quite a diverse set of takeaways there, reflecting the depth of the topics that were on the agenda.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
One of the key things on everyone's agenda in procurement is how new tech solutions can be incorporated into our future business model. Do we adapt to incorporate them into what we do, or avoid thinking about them altogether until they take our jobs away? In my second clip from ProcureCon West, here's one delegate's take on the tech agenda.
A big thing that I took away was there was a lot of talk about automation, and not necessarily the AI concept and the really sophisticated automation, but self-serve, end-to-end user experiences being so critical. We know this, but how do we get better at it was a really big thing I was thinking about. Also on the team member side, they have a core set of skills, but how do we continue to skill them up and evolve how they do, the skills they should have, and how do we make sure we're accountable for that and sort of drive that forward?
That's a great way to think about the future. Tech solutions will come in all different forms, from basic to advanced. Making sure our procurement teams are ready to work with what's out there, having a vision for the future, is a great way to stay relevant. A way to adapt rather than die.
2.
I'm returning to the Athens conference for some great tips on promoting sustainability in the business from Maria Alexou, who's a senior leader in the sustainability space in Europe. Maria's presentation on the topic ended with some great advice for procurement professionals working in the field. 1. Remember, sustainable procurement is not easy. It's complicated, demanding and multidimensional. 2. Sustainable procurement takes time. It can't happen overnight, but it can start today. 3. Maturity matters. If my organisation is mature in its approach to sustainability, I can lead and empower suppliers. If I'm less than mature, I can learn from more mature companies in my supply chain. 4. Change is based on partnership with suppliers, and cooperation is key for making a change. Ask, is what I'm doing new better, proper, right and new? If yes, do it. How's that for inspiration to keep you motivated on your sustainable procurement journey? Thanks, Maria.
1.
Today's challenging business conditions have created an opportunity for procurement to generate savings and value, both of which are critical investments in the company's growth. To explore this unique time, Art of Procurement is partnering with Upstream to host Source to Growth 2023, a virtual innovation summit. Kelly Barner and I will be joining an impressive group of speakers and panellists being featured at the event, which is taking place virtually on March 22nd, 2023 from 11 a.m. till 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope you can join us. Register now using the link in the show notes or going to artofprocurement.com calendar.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.